specifically George Maciunas, to join the group. Again, she was ripe for change. The patriarchy in Japan did not support women artists, did not support women professionals. It was, and still catching up, certainly like other countries, but Korea, China, Japan more so now, catching up with the inclusion of women. But that was her migration. Her reason was she was not getting any attention for her art there. Fluxus was multi-dimensional, multidisciplinary, multi-gender, transgender. It was a free path for her. So she came. Namjoon also came at the same time for John Cage, but they all converged around Fluxus on Canal Street at that time. So it was largely a series of cultural events that brought them together, and once formed that way, became a cultural force. They are not single-handedly, but are largely attributed with being the mother and father of video art. Pike first as the father of video art, almost not a decade, but 7 years earlier, using video as an artistic medium, ostensibly for the first time. You have to be careful in art history never to say you're the first at anything, because the cultural police or somebody will try to, of course, knock that down. But you're certainly among the first. It's a lot of term papers and PhDs written about these things. But that's not our place to do. But we're to make them accessible and human, basically. So the idea that Namjoon wielded the medium for the first time. Shigeko as significantly nurtured the medium. And again, the traditional role models of a mother and father, but as the mother of it, and that's not something that we coined. That would be a little too cutesy and corny to come out with. But other articles I could cite that have alluded to that, because she was nurturing. She ran programs that supported young artists at Anthology Film Archives, for example. She was the first curator there in a world of men filmmakers. The avant-garde cinema, of course, was huge and very well established and very tight-knit. But she started a video program there and gave the artists a chance, and particularly women. It leveled the playing field, she always said, because of the inclusion and the accessibility, and there were no pre-formed hierarchies for video. It came new, fresh, and women seized it, and she helped them in a very big way with anthology screenings, and men as well, young people, students even. She would have open screenings, much like we call now open mic at clubs and coffee houses for singers and so on. She would do open screenings where if you had a video and you thought you were a video artist, you could bring it to Anthology Film Archives, the bastion of avant-garde cinema, the expanded cinema in moving image expertise that you could show there as well. And that program now, and we have the records of every person that ever screened there. Now they're often the who's who of visual arts, largely. So that combination led them in a way to that role. I don't think they sought that role necessarily, and it didn't become defined until much later in their careers. But I think that's in a sense how their impact, their platform was established, and then how that impact is a whole other issue. How it impacted me. I was initially involved in the performing arts, as is Cheryl. My wife was with New York City Ballet, and I worked for the Metropolitan Opera, and we were uptown artists, very, very different geographically, culturally. It was a very different scene. But again, all of those borders are permeable. Like, for example, Allen Ginsberg's associated with the cafe scene, the Beat generation of Greenwich Village, the avant-garde scene there. But he was great friends with Nam June and Shigeko, so the permeability across Houston Street and Greenwich Village, similar to the theater district and the art scene up on the Upper West Side at Lincoln Center. I also did Broadway for many years for Walt Disney Theatrical Productions when they brought their vault, as they called it, to the live stage. And how do you visually make a movie into a show that you can do 8 times a week live when they're cartoon characters and all the effects that you have to do. So visually that expanded my palette a great deal. The opera, of course, has a little of everything. Gesamtkunstwerk, as Wagner would say, one art, but it's all of the art forms: music, dance, visual arts, costuming, makeup, hair. I mean, it's just everything. So and I was there. There's 30 years. I just retired, actually. I have one more show this summer. But
they'll keep calling you.
So that change, though, came with Francis Whitney, who is a great patron of New York City Ballet. I eventually became partners with the lighting designer for New York City Ballet. And because of Cheryl, of course, I was there a lot. And I met Francis Whitney, who's a Whitney by marriage. She's actually a Janeway, but very early first family kind of thing, and very influential in the art world. And she said to me, dearie, you can do this anywhere. And because she was in fine art, she happened to be living at the time with Lincoln Kirstein's brother, the founder of New York City Ballet, with George Balanchine and Lincoln Center. So she was very connected to the art world. And I started working with her. Over a 17-year period, we worked together. She's the godmother of our children. And she introduced me to fine art. And at that time, the Whitney Museum was doing a show that, at that time, meaning about 1979, for a show that was being planned for 1980-81, that was going to be the first media retrospective of a video artist, Nam June's first retrospective at the old Whitney up on Madison Avenue. And he was bringing an experimental laser video machine from Germany, and they needed someone here to help install it, operate it for the 3 or 4 months, and get to introduce this not only new medium of video art to the mainstream public. There's an axiom that when art is placed in a major institution, accepted or embraced, that it rises to the level of fine art. So video art had been around at that point, more than a decade, but that was a breakthrough moment. And I was fortunate enough to be there just as a task person at the time. But it was the only job I ever had where I would actually get there early. So I would go in before the museum opened to play with the equipment. And sure enough, every day, Nam June was there too. And I thought, wow, this guy just like made it to the top of the art world. Why, he should be on the beach in the Bahamas or something. But he was there every day, tinkering with stuff, playing with stuff, working. And of course, he would come by the laser gallery and we started experimenting with things there that I had already been doing. I'd show him, and it turned into about a 40-year experiment that we never stopped until around 2004 was the last thing we did together at Rockefeller Center, a really big outdoor public art installation, and then he passed in 2006, more or less. So that changed my path, and but I still do performing arts, of course, and I do fine art. Production is a young person's game, I must say. It's quite more rigorous live theater. I don't call it live for nothing. And fine art, I find I can probably do into my 80s and 90s. It's a different time frame, different immediacy, different pressure than performing arts. So I was thankful to have that and this foundation, something I can do in my old age to help and still feel like I'm contributing and vital and active and doing something.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that. Again, this is all very well documented, but I really wanted to just include from your perspective, since you work so closely with Namjoon, and you just knew the family, and this kind of transitions into talking about the space itself. So the approach to preserving their what was their living space and also their workspace. I did read on, there's a small blurb on the National Trust site that says that everything is pretty much where it would have been, when they lived and worked there.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to hear a little bit about the approach to preserving the space, and was there anything that they requested, or has it really been up to you to kind of determine how the space is preserved, if that makes sense?
Yes, yes, indeed, because there is estate planning and all of those kinds of notions, and there was really none of that. Really, it was very much. I would say first that a lot of the approach is about the space, legacy of place, as it were, because it is the last flux house. Fluxus at one time. It's kind of a pun on the word flop house, derelict buildings that people take over, squatters. The flux houses, though, were anything but that. These were very driven, creative people, and it actually brought about the era of AIR, Artist in Residence. The city of New York actually recognized that this was a good thing. These were not squatters. These were pioneers. And it was George Maciunas' vision that there would be these cooperative buildings, that the retail floor would support the artists living upstairs. So they didn't have to be artist slash bartender, artist waiter, and drywall carpenter installer. So that was the first time that many of the artists could just do their work, and it caused an explosion of a renaissance of innovation and work that's acknowledged to this day. What wasn't acknowledged to this day is Fluxus and George Maciunas were always kind of a fringe area, sometimes chagrined for their honesty and their radical approach, which is legendary. So for the recognition of the era and this building, the last flux house that's still mostly artists. Joan Jonas lives across the air shaft. Some of the original Video Freaks lived downstairs. Video FREEX, which was actually a bootleg TV station at one time. And Simone Forti's loft, a very famous dancer, Trish Brown. It's just an amazing repertory of people, and to have, but not so much well known or recognized mainstream. So when we had this opportunity from Valerie, I was so pleased to see that when I wrote the profile, I mentioned the Flux House, that it was historical place, a little bit of background, that George Maciunas and Fluxus had been the settlers of Soho, and that it's so important now when people think of Soho, they think of Prada, Gucci, high fashion, and it is all of that, and really great to the max, very creative scene. But it's very little of what actually was the breeding ground for that, with Fluxus settling Soho, which at that time was like Beirut. It was a very dangerous place. You didn't go there at night, really, if you didn't know where you were going, and straight there kind of thing. So to have that acknowledged in the National Trust, Fluxus has been called a lot of things, but very few times I would imagine a national treasure. So I think that's really an important part of it. For the artists themselves, I will say that it was easy to maintain the space because it just had a feel, and also they never threw away anything. That was Shigeko particularly, which is an amazing opportunity as an archive. I must say, very rare archaeology. It's like finding a tomb that hasn't been raided or renovated in contemporary terms. So it's really important space that way. But what the overriding guiding principle was that it was all about the art. I mentioned the Fluxus Co-op, but the other idea was that what that allowed for the art and the artist, and it's an old principle in a way, but the art and the life and the work and the art were inseparable. Your life was your art. You lived in the art. And I would say clearly 90%, and when you come, you must come and see some of the pictures, 90% of that almost 5,000 square feet was all about the art, filled with the art, piles of art, workshops, things in progress, and editing rooms, and electronics, and so on. And a little place up in the corner where they had a mattress where they would sleep. The kitchen was nice because partly, not nice, but it had fixtures and functional because there were a lot of cooperative dinners as well. Not like a commune, but a lot of times that was a very close neighborhood scene and a lot of interactions and parties and so on. So that kitchen, as you'll see, is pretty much the same. Right to the point of Shigeko's recipes, which when we have gatherings, we sometimes try to do her recipes or a Fluxus dinner, which some are kind of legendary and have been recorded. We try to reenact some of that. But that being said, then the artwork, which was there, remained kind of the same look and feel. We have actually pictures of that era, of course, while they were there living and working. And except for the pieces that had fallen into disrepair, there's one monumental piece we just brought back and restored. It hadn't been seen there in 30 years, but if you look at all the historical pictures, it's in all the pictures. There was also the nude descending a staircase, which was acquired by MoMA, a Shigeko piece. Actually, the first video work, I believe, acquired by a major installation, even before Namjoon. She was always very proud of that MoMA acquired. And but since MoMA had it, we spent 2 weeks in the MoMA warehouse dimensioning it, and we made a replica of it so that the loft still had that look and feel, placed where it was essentially at that time. So there is some deliberateness to it, like that, for example, and the restoring of a piece that had actually been damaged in a roof leak flood there in the loft. That sort of a famous video Soho Soap came out of. Also telling that story of the Great Flood, where they almost lost all their archives. But didn't, fortunately. But they damaged some of the art. So that we brought back and completing that continuing story. And I think that's part of the goal, is continuity of the story. So it's easy as a guiding principle then that way to keep it. And you must recall that Namjoon had a stroke in 1996 and became an infirmary for 10 years. He died in 2006. And Shigeko just had a solo woman show at the Whitney Museum. She got the Maya Deren Award for filmmaking. And Namjoon had a stroke that year, and she stopped working to take care of her husband, 57 years old, and never went back. She fell ill after he passed away in 2006, and lived until 2015 when our story there began. And so for 20 years, 2 decades, that center of the movement became an artist infirmary. So it was in very much need of restoration of the artwork, finding all the artwork, gathering it back. Don't forget, when hospital beds and all this come in, it changed. So that was the only work that we had to do, but it was only to put it back on track.
Got it. So they didn't really specify, you
No.
want things, right?
No, just well, they work quite specific. They had always wanted a foundation, both of Namjoon and Shigeko, as early as the 90s, the mid 90s, before all the trouble and the sickness. And they tried one filing, but it's no easy thing to get a 501c3 art institution approved. You have to jump through a lot of hoops. Because I had worked at the opera in not-for-profit for many years, I was used to the rigors of it and how to still be creative within the constraints of the paperwork and all the get approval for everything, almost everything. And so we were able to get it in pretty short order in 2017, actually almost 2 years since she passed before we got the foundation going. But they did say that not only did they want the foundation, but Shigeko specifically said she wanted her artwork restored and made available for future generations. Don't forget, this was a disrupted career. Also a career where women of color, Asian, female, immigrant, didn't really get, it was better than in Japan, patriarchy, but she didn't get the credit. Plus Namjoon was so hugely successful, everyone thought he overshadowed her, which he never would ever do, but in a way inadvertently, and with the culture of this country at the time, she never got her really proper attention until just now. And we've put her back out as if it was a mid-career survey when she stopped working, fixed everything up as she asked us to do, restored, put it out for a new generation of audiences, and reaction has been phenomenal. But after that, it's up to her and the audience, right? But now the reaction has been great. So they also interestingly called for a part of the mission to be to support young video artists and video art itself, the health of future of video art. So we're active in doing that. We have an art prize for young video artists to try stuff. We make our place and equipment available for research and seeing their techniques and things close up, which we preserve. So that was really the extent of it. And I pulled a lot of their wishes from the 501c3 filing they did, which of course now we have, because we have all their affairs. I'm the executor for Shigeko, who outlived Namjoon by 10 years. Namjoon's archive did go to the Smithsonian because of a family kind of settlement that was done. But we have the personal archive that is, I think, more the personal archive of Namjoon. The art legacy of Shigeko, art legacy of Namjoon is at the Smithsonian. But we have a lot of pieces that he gifted to her that he was working on there at the time and so on.
Yeah, and something, Valerie did mention about one of the things she liked about having this site as part of the network was having, showing two artists and how they kind of worked and lived together. And she did mention, the angle of women not getting that recognition, in their lifetime. So it sounds like the space is a balance between, so what you're saying is her kind of art archive and some of his personal
Oh yes, well, and the editing studio too, which is, I don't know if you saw some of the pictures maybe from the website or our application for us. Yeah, the tools that they used and so on, they shared. A lot of writings. Surprisingly, you would think it's a kind of a non-discursive medium, video artists, but both of them were prolific writers. We have probably 20 journals that she did, Cheryl's going through, and some things personal, some things recipes, some day planner, some ideas for pieces and
stories.
Stories, poems
About her life.
Poems with watercolors. I mean, it's just really an amazing discovery of the range of work. And Namjoon, of course, got famous and got caught into the sort of the Elvis syndrome. He had to keep playing that hit song. He didn't even like video after all. Don't quote me on that, but the art appraisers would go crazy. But he did want to, yeah, do more for the future of video and experimentation. It was really
Sure.
always about experimentation, exploring, pushing further and further. There's a great video on called "Moon is the Oldest TV." If you want to see a more recent thing about Nam June, and it shows some of my work with the lasers we did at the Guggenheim, his second retrospective, which was post video, as he called it, work of his.
Yeah, no, that'd be great. And so since we're talking about, you mentioned the application, something I think is that Valerie did mention is that so you're in the process of starting to think about because I know you're open kind of for private tours.
Yeah, yeah.
So I guess the question is, you're at the point right where you're thinking about making the space more available to the public, if I understand that correctly, and to be able to I guess what Valerie was saying is that a lot of the sites are already established in that way when they join the network, but you're
Right.
joining at a point where you're in the process of figuring that out, and now you're part of that. So I was wondering if you could speak to that a little bit about the value of being part of that network as you move forward with making the space more available to the public.
Yeah, we had been open in a way to tours, but mostly visitors. We would always involve a tour, but that were scholars, researchers, academics, people from the art world, kind of still that little contained, bubble, ivory tower kind of idea, but quite a few. We kept, of course, the record of them all, research books that now have been written from, including in movies, films that have been made with our archive. Because don't
NYU.
forget, now we're about 10 years
Yeah.
in, but I would say in the last 3 months, since we were awarded the affiliate membership, we've had more people visit in 3 months than in the last 10 years.
Wow.
Yeah, we just Sunday we had two groups of one of 20 and one of 16, whereas normally it'd be one or two researchers, sometimes just one, who would come and go through boxes.
NYU classes.
And then we started to have classes back then, classes coming for field trips from NYU, media studies from Yale, Stanford, as far away as Stanford, and we have a teacher, a professor at Cooper Union that's doing a course on Shigeko and the era next semester. That's going to be teaching there, and so that part of it, and that got us a little bit used to talking about, tour, even if it was a one-off person. We're still talking about stuff, so it started to come together fairly well. We're still honing that, and it's always different groups. So, but it has the importance to me of, as I kind of referred to a little pejoratively, that it's kind of the bubble, the people who knew about them, people who wanted to study something in specific that they needed to know more about. I'm interested in stewarding this project, that people that don't know that don't know anything about video art, they've never seen video art, and that's the audience that is available because of this program, and that's really exciting to see the reactions of those. I know the reactions of other people for 50 years. This is now, I think, much the same as getting, Fluxus on a website of the National Trust for Historical Preservation. That's going to, make people, whether, I don't even care if they like it or not, but they're thinking about it, and that's good for everything, good for people too.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing is not just the increased kind of visibility of these two specific artists, but you see this as an opportunity, I guess, for a broader audience to learn about the Fluxus movement more generally, if that's what I'm.
Yeah, and video art. Now,
Yeah.
Fluxus is very interdisciplinary, and
Yeah.
and there aren't even that many. Maybe a couple of what would be considered video artists influxes. Yeah, their video legacy though is a very important element though too, and I could talk about that somewhat too because of the media literacy, the importance of kids understanding like the communication technology then, because that's really what they did. They took communication technology like television and turned it into an artistic medium for personal expression. And I will say I've studied at NYU with Dr. Neil Postman, who's founded the program of media ecology, which makes the parallel to media complex technological environments as an ecosystem, as an ecology. And that's really the way to wrap your head around it. Otherwise, it's just a huge, enormous, complex system. It's very difficult to understand. But that gives a chance. You've probably heard me use the analogy to a food chain. A lot of these developments and continuities. So those kind of symbiosis, interdependency of systems and so on. And that part of it is, I think, in a way, important for the opportunity of this platform because, mind you, both of these artists are quite successful. A lot of people saw museums shows. A lot of people have seen the art. We're not certainly as broad an audience as we would like, and that's improving. I imagine, I hope. But the difference in coming to the artist place of work, where they're lived and struggled, failed sometimes, and also innovated. Some works created there that are almost household names in the art world anyway. And that personal connection, I mean, they can relate to more. Video art may be a stretch for a lot of people. Say, oh, that's not art, and it's got, but then they see that, well, yeah, there are technological tools, but in the very beginning, there were no technological tools. They had to make those tools, which goes back to the continuity to like the Renaissance, when painters would make their own brushes because they wanted a certain technique, a certain type or feel, or they made their own paint. Sculptors would make their chisels and tools, and you had to do that with video art because there were none. So they get kind of that connection to the experimentation of all artists over time, and that video art just falls into place with that at a certain point of personal understanding. And of course they're in the kitchen or in the place where the bookshelves are stacked up with stuff and papers and important drawings, probably worth priceless, stuffed in with things. They can relate to that as people. And that level of the artists, beyond the demographic of all the artists, all the audiences that are familiar with them, they're not familiar on the engaging with them in their studio. And I'm sure that's for all of us part of the beauty of it, is that connection, the personal connection of the lived space, the workspace even. Everyone's got a workshop in the garage or basement also, that they can get a real connection to them, which then that helps them appreciate the art, seek it out more, tell other people, and so on.
Sure. And so a couple of questions coming from that. One that I think was interesting, and I don't know if you make this connection or not, but these days, you mentioned them having to make their own equipment, right? And not everybody has a phone, and we have apps like TikTok where people are making their own videos kind of constantly. You don't necessarily think of it as art, but there's something that almost feels like a precursor to our modern use of video that is kind of constant now, right?
Yeah, that's a very important point, and I think that I mean, art is a tricky word too. Liam Jim's got a written on the wall. So art is only a word, you know, and conceptually, but it's still expression. They're using video. They're using moving image and audio visual technology as a means of expression. That's a new thing for people, right? Used to be the prior dominant media was print, and then after that it was radio, just voice. So that's a really important observation that you made, and that is part of, I think, why it's valuable, because the understanding of any of these complex systems, you have to imagine the first Portapak, which was a video camera. It was like carrying a small appliance around with you. When you see we have a couple at the loft. But that opened up everything. And the distance between the Portapak and this is really a straight line. And it is a food chain, how it evolved. And that, however, is a little problematic because it happens so fast and it's so powerful, and it seems like it's technology taking over. But if you connect it back, and in fact they do this in like the cosmology, right? When they want to study the universe is big and getting bigger all the time. So the way they try to sort it out is that they go back in time to when it wasn't, when it was first the Big Bang idea. They want to study that because then you can still wrap your head around what's going on before that happened. And this, I would say, that was the Big Bang moment in personal communication, was video art, the innovation of the Portapak, personal communication that is two-way. Up until that point, communication was one way from NBC, CBS, or ABC. Force feeding. This was actually liberated, and it has exploded. It was thought to be this great, at Namjoon particularly, a great breakthrough, utopian, going to be, you know, someday everyone will have their own TV station, which basically now they do on YouTube and so on. But it's problematic. It's not, he didn't really imagine the floodgates opening like that and what would emerge. And it's very difficult for young people who are now the first generations to grow up just with this, not with the continuity of the development. So I think that a need for a media literacy and understanding of those early days is something that we can start to offer, and I think propose that it be refined more. There is no curriculum about media in the schools. There's no Thomas Edison, there's no Alexander Graham Bell that tells you that, oh, this technology, this all of a sudden this just seems like a magical technology that exists and gives it too much power. Then it's not humanized, that people made TV tubes, glass blowers, and wiring things by hand, and experimenting, innovating, failing, struggling, breakthrough. That humanizes technology. We don't have that for these generations anyway. So I think that's important to instill, and they did call for a video center, both Namjoon and Shigeko, and we hope to be able to put that history into something fun. And like the Smithsonian, you go to the Museum of Industry, well, have it kind of, and there is the Paley Center for Media and Museum of the Moving Image, but they don't address that personal communication side of it the way the video artists did and continue to do. Their work is very vital still, and we hope to make it more so by this platform for larger audiences to engage with it.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you mentioned I have very fond memories of the Museum of the Moving Image. I was born and raised in Queens, so did field trip there as a kid.
That's great.
Native New York.
Yeah, they sort of moved away from video. Shigeko had a very big retrospective there in 1991. But now they're really cinema, really refined
Yeah.
that much further into to cinema and moving image. Although they have video shows still once in a while. They even had a symposium on light shows a few years back, I remember, which was really interesting. So yeah, it's a great facility, but I think we need it's probably the only one, and we need to have some of those more almost on a curriculum level around being recognized more for young people to wrap their head. Even but many of them have never even seen a television before. They come to the loft and it's like wow, it's like it blows their mind. It's crazy.
It's fun.
Yeah. I mean, I'm old enough to have used like floppy disks and things like that in some of my younger
Right.
cousins.
Yeah, that's a whole food chain.
It's a fossil basically for them.
Well, you should see the laser discs that we have, which are like big as a frisbee, and the early tape systems. Well, you'll see it hopefully at some time.
No, this was really helpful. I guess maybe one final question might be just you talked about the audience and it growing from people who are scholars and things like that, and now I guess you're getting more like I don't know college groups and things like that. Where what kind and you mentioned so much young people. What kind of audience do you want to see develop for this space? Um,
I think
what are your thoughts?
eventually,
Is it really anybody or is it young
yeah.
people?
No, I think it is everybody. You don't need a special interest. We had a group yesterday that is some young entrepreneur, and he just books. They're going to see Brutalist Architecture tour next week, and it was about 16 people, very young, bright people who want to do stuff more than just randomly go around New York and grouping together, which was really great to see. And then the other group was actually from a gallery called Now Here, which deals with famous places. There's also one called On This Spot, which is tours of interesting historical places in New York where art happened. So it is female art. There is a big movement that way. Um, so I think ultimately families. I think, for example, the way Dia became not an art institution as much as a destination. It's almost like going to Disneyland of the artwork because they have these huge pieces. Museums can't show them; it's too big to store. So nobody ever got to see Richard Serra giant, steel sculptures, Dan Flavin's, light installations the size of a house. Museums can't deal with that work. Nobody got to see it, but it's important work. Video's the same way. Museums have trouble storing it, keeping it working, dedicating. So we maybe give a repository a place where that's accessible, and we also loan to other people, and we help other video artists archive, preserve, catalog, and store their work for the future. Otherwise, that is a risk that some of that work will get lost, and it's huge. For example, Electronic Arts Intermix does the tapes of the people, but there's also all this really cool equipment and handmade sculpture and gear that we hope to help make available. We have actually in Beacon a larger facility than the loft. The loft is kind of the legacy space, and we have a workshop and a studio space much bigger up in Beacon where it's much cheaper, frankly, but also near Dia. So we get this flow of art people.
Okay.
And we're just doing a public kind of display space for the first time this summer. So
Our
you
son
must
is
come up. Our
managing.
son runs that up there and down here. So now you will put you on our mailing list, so you have to hear these
Please
things.
do. Yeah, I would have loved to come out this time, but the way I know they want to run this in May. to coincide with Asian American Pacific Islander Month.
Yeah.
So,
Well, it's an
um,
interesting footnote too. Yeah, I don't envy you trying to wade through all that material to get an article out of it, but to be brave. I would like to go through it. We hit on some interesting things. Maybe if you have a copy of it later, we could transcribe it or something and maybe make something else out of it as well, with your credit and help, of course. But the idea, I think that. Let's see. Oh, that to having um, the Pacific. There's an interesting exhibit I want to tell you about. That's Shigeko. Shigeko actually just we had her show for the first time in Korea just like a few months ago, and interestingly, it was a feminist show called Connecting Bodies, and it was about Asian female artists um, because Asian females in general have had kind of a rough time of it. Not that it's any picnic here, I'm sure, but either. But now that there are women ascendants to museum directorships, head of curatorial departments, they're really kicking butt and they're just doing these amazing shows. This was 80 female artists called Connecting Bodies, Asian women artists at the National Museum of Korea. And Shigeko's proudly part of that as an activist, part of her feminist activism at the time. But importantly, there's another one coming up that's going to originate in Yokohama in Japan museum, and then go to Seoul for the Museum of Contemporary Art, the National Museum of Korea. And what that's focusing on is that, yeah, we know that Japan and Korea for thousands of years probably have been at each other's throats. But what were the artists doing at that time? What were the artists in Japan doing? What were the artists in Korea doing? So they're bringing Korean and Japanese artists in this bilateral show between Yokohama and Seoul, and Shigeko's going to be featured there too, and looking at that kind of as maybe an elevated position, or it'll be interesting to see what they come up with. I think it's a great important um, uh, kind of, it's not east-west fusion, it's east-east, kind of uh, bridge that they're building. And I think just largely that Namjoon was Korean and Shigeko was Japanese was always kind of a thing for a while, except in the 60s everybody was, she did a program called with a performing group that she formed called Red, White, Yellow, Black, and it was American Indian, Navajo Indian person. She, of course, being yellow, Mary Lucy, a white artist, and a black artist from Harlem, a poet. So that kind of sensibility of that, not only transnationalism but inclusion and well, I hazard to say diversity,
They had a
but
lot of fun
equity.
doing it. That
Yeah, and that's why they did it. They didn't do
Not
it
for-
to be activists. At a panel once, they said, "Oh, you were really, way ahead of the time." I said, "Well, we didn't even think that way. It was
Yeah.
just thinking natural." But I think that importantly is as much of a contribution to is that maintaining what we always think is simple and should just be, but politically, culturally, economically, all these different things happen. So, but they maintained, that held the ground, and now it's coming back around again. So hopefully, we'll have some more vital. I never wanted the foundation to be like a mausoleum, where you just put the stuff, preserve the stuff like stuffed animals or something, and that it stays vital and contemporary, and that's a part of the goal too that we're thankful for with this platform.
Yeah, no, this was great. So, thank you so much. Again, I've done the research and, I spoke to Valerie, but I think it was really
Great.
important to kind of hear perspective, especially since like she mentioned, you're at a little bit maybe of a different stage in some of the other, um, homes and studios in the network. So I
Yeah,
think
well,
that's
but I hope to show the continuity of that too. It's true. The workspaces there, well, a lot of it was a different era also, but the things that are the same. The workspaces um, of a Wyeth and a Pike and Kubota, I think are similar. And then going through even like Pollock and Krasner, or Jean Claude and Christo, I don't know if they should be. But you can start to see that there is this continuity, and it's not an alien technology, that it's just a different tool. Shigeko likened it to a new paintbrush, literally, she said. So that hopefully will blend more and expand that range. We were the first, I think, to join the Aspen Institute. Has this program for Artist Endowed Foundations initiative, and they called us and asked us to join. They said, "Well, you're the first video art foundation that we have," and I said, "Well, that's because they were the first video artists, but you will have more. Don't worry. There'll be a lot more
That was
coming."
many years ago too.
Yeah. So I expect hopefully, I hope that this will be much the same way, that will move into a level of mainstream culture that will be good for inclusion of everyone.
well. What will happen now is, so I'm gonna start. I'll write the piece and I'll send it to my editor. She usually circulates it, so
Okay.
you should get a chance to see it. If I messed up on anything, you'll have a chance to
Oh,
flag for me. But
great.
yeah, it's just to make sure that the piece is accurately representing.
Sure. Oh, I
Um,
appreciate that. Thanks. Thank you
so
very much. It's a
but
lot.
we usually do that, and I think they have photos.
Well, yeah,
But
let
if
me
you
know
want,
because we have a photo archive galore. But yeah, we sent them quite a bit for the application. I'm sure a permanent file in the profile. But anything that comes up, you say, "Oh, I can't imagine, or I can't picture that so well." We're be happy to try to find a picture to go with it. Uh,
no, that's great. I will ask. I'll ask them what they have, and then I will circle back if it turns out that we need anything else. But yeah, thank you so much. It was lovely
all
meeting
right.
both of you, and I'll be in touch by email.
Very good. See you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Take care. Have a
Natalie.
great rest of the week.
You
Good.
too.
Thanks. You too. Bye.